Lorain County Community College grads are ready for the future.
I turned to LCCC for a degree in advanced technology.
To gain the skills needed to start a new career in cybersecurity.
To become a nurse and make a difference in our community.
To save money before earning my degree at a 4-year university.
To earn a degree that fits with my life.
You can turn to LCCC. We will prepare you for the jobs of the future. Lorain County Community College. Always here, always ready. Enroll today.
What's the big deal?
Where can you get pizza, bread twists, specialty chicken, and more for just $5.99 each?
Is it at Domino's?
He hands off hand-tossed pizza and a marble cookie brownie. He's going! There's a lot of variety on the radio and at Domino's too, where you can
Mix and match 2 or more. $5.99 each at Domino's.
2-item minimum. Pan pizza, bone-in wings, and bread bowls will be extra. Ask for this limited time offer. Prices, participation, delivery area, and charges may vary.
Hey, welcome everyone to the From the Shadows podcast. I'm your host, Shane Grove, and sadly, the super producer Jason is not with us again today, or tonight, or whenever you're listening to this. He's still not 100% or ready to join me, but hopefully he'll be back soon. So keep him in your prayers. But I want to introduce today's guest. It's always great to have on fellow podcasters. And I won't even hold it against him that he's holding a Tim Hortons cup. Since I'm a loyalist to Dunkin' Donuts, and he and I just had a really thrilling discussion on coffee between so be thankful I didn't hit record and subject you guys to that. But joining me today from a really cool podcast, The Phantom Faction, is Dan Hammond. Dan Hammond, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. It's always nice to be a guest for a change.
But now you're going to have to do all the work, right? You're going to have to.
I don't have to come. I don't have to think of the questions though, right? I don't have to have those long awkward pauses and where I'm trying to think of something. So it's all good. That's all on you.
That's all on me. Okay. Well, I'll try not to be too awkward. But
and even if you are a Dunkin' Donuts guy, you know.
Oh yes. Yes, and see now I'm kind of jonesing for some Dunkin' Donuts coffee. Even though I think your exact quote was, "It tastes like mud," but I will not.
Well, maybe the Canadian Dunkin' Donuts tasted like mud.
Yeah, we'll blame it on that.
All 2 franchises that they had years and years ago.
Well, Dan. So tell our listeners a little bit about yourself. Because I know some stuff about you, and I mean, I'm excited for our listeners to hear all the different types of experiences you've had, hear about your podcast, and hear about your book. Yes. So let's get into how you got into the paranormal field.
Well, so I got into the paranormal as a hobby about 5 years ago. I grew up in a haunted house. I had some terrible experiences as a kid, a small child, and I pushed it all away for many, many years. And about 5 years ago, I was at a friend's place, and I don't have cable or satellite. I got rid of it a long time ago. If it's not on Netflix or YouTube, then I'm not watching it. Just because I didn't want to spend $100 a month for 900 channels and nothing to watch, right? So,
man, oh man, see, you're making me feel real guilty now.
Okay, you got 3 satellite dishes on your roof?
No, but I wish Spectrum down here only cost $100 a month with nothing to watch.
Well, it goes to show you how long it's been. But I was over at a friend's house, and he's one of these guys that has every channel under the sun. And he had to run out to do some errands, and he threw me the remote. He said, "Here, watch some TV. I'll be back." He said, "Grab a beer, whatever." So I turned the TV on, and I didn't have to flip through anything. It was this show called Ghost Adventures, and I'd never heard of it. And I'm like, "Oh, this this looks interesting. Here's these three knuckleheads, banging around in the dark and screaming at every little thing and running out of the buildings and using all this crazy equipment. And I thought, I'd like to do that. I thought that's really cool. So I started asking, and I had no idea that there were paranormal investigative teams. No idea. I thought it was all it was all on TV because it wasn't a thing in my life at the time, right? So I knew there was people that banged around the bush looking for Bigfoot, and people looking at the skies looking for UFOs and stuff, but never really thought about the ghosts. And so I was talking to my neighbor a few doors down about a house on our street. So I live on an old golf course. The subdivision I'm on was built in 1973. So the original clubhouse, it's old stone, limestone building is still there, and it's a house today, but you've got all these subdivision style homes around it. And I said to my neighbor, just as a joke, said, "Oh, that place must be haunted like crazy." And she looked at me and she kind of went, "You have no idea." I was like, "Really?" And she says, "Oh yeah." She says, it's so haunted. It's like blood coming out of the floorboards haunted." And I was like, "Holy cow!" And
what kind of golf do you guys play?
Yeah,
like
full contact golf.
I guess.
Right?
I guess so.
But it's like hockey, right? You got to put some fighting in there or something. But I was like, "Really?" And it kind of dawned on me, like, I never saw anybody in this home. I never saw anybody cutting the grass. Anybody coming or going. So it just had like that weird, mystique to it, right? It's like, that creepy house down the street with the old lady, but you never see her, but you see her silhouette, in the window kind of thing. So, and then she says to me, she says, "Oh, I have a friend who's a paranormal investigator." And I was like, "You're kidding me." And she's like, "Yeah, we've got a team in town here, and they go around, they go banging around through people's homes and museums and all sorts of things." So I connected with this young lady. Her name is Michelle, and ever since that moment when I connected with her, I just started having crazy incidents in life, adventures, like my own ghost adventures. I also discovered that I had some clairvoyant abilities. And we can get into that more later. But everything has happened within the last 5 years. Like this paranormal team. I've written a book. I've got a podcast. We're going on 3 years now. I've been on 3 paranormal reality shows. Just all sorts of stuff. And I'm in my town, I'm known as the ghost guy, right? Like I'll walk down.
There's a lot worse things you can be known as. But
that's right. But I'll walk down the street and people will go, "Oh, you're the ghost guy," right? Because I've hosted events where we've done investigations at local museums and other historic sites in town, and people have come and we've shown them all of our evidence, our EVPs, some of the photos we get, that sort of thing. And I'm the ghost guy. So, like you said, that's not a bad thing.
No.
And
it's a good conversation. I mean, like, you got to be the most popular guy at a party if it's in town, because you got the best stories. Who else has got better stories?
Oh, for sure. And I worked in a correctional facility for 18 years as an officer. So it's either ghosts or inmates, right?
Yeah.
Or haunted jail stories too, right?
There you go.
So, yeah.
Yeah, the clairvoyant stuff, since you mentioned it, why do you think, was that something that you knew you had? I mean, how does that just all of a sudden one day you say, "Oh, I think I'm clairvoyant"? Is that something that you may have had and just kind of pushed to the back, or once you started opening your mind and becoming open to the possibility of ghosts and spirits and everything else that showed itself?
Let me start at the beginning, and it'll all come together. Okay. So when I was 3 years old, so I was born in Toronto. actually Rexdale, which is like a suburb of Toronto. And my dad grew up in like downtown Toronto and near the old stockyards, and and he always had a dream of getting out of the city, having some land out in the country, where all your neighbors are hundreds of yards away, and farmlands and forests and all that good stuff. Because he grew up like with 11 brothers and sisters and in a tiny little house, and
wanted some space.
Yeah, wanted some quiet time, right? So they found this house out in an area called Caledon East, and it was a little bungalow, a raised bungalow, 4 acres of land, and my mom and dad fell in love with it, and they bought the place. So we moved up there when I was 3 years old, and right after moving in, I started having terrible nightmares. Like nightmares that a 3-year-old shouldn't be able to come up with. It wasn't like it wasn't like the lump of laundry in the corner looked like a bad guy, when you turn the lights off, or it wasn't like the monsters under the bed or the boogeyman in the closet. I was having dreams where it was like endless fields of mechanized like cogs and almost like the inside of a Swiss watch, right? Like all these things turning. And
yeah, that's like that's a
bizarre,
crazy like science fiction type of.
Yeah, it was almost like a steampunk kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But in these fields or these machines, my father would be stuck inside, and he would be getting decapitated, his limbs getting torn off, eviscerated, and like what kind of 3-year-old has nightmares like that, right? It's like terrible stuff.
A future serial killer.
Yeah, no kidding. Give me time. So, like I would wake up screaming and hyperventilating, and my poor mom would come running in trying to calm me down. And she always said I was looking at the man in the corner. And I would always be pointing, saying, "There's a man in the corner, man in the corner." Of course, my mom can't see anything. But these nightmares went on for years. Like with quite some frequency, right? So, and there was other things going on in the house that weren't only affecting me. Like we would hear footsteps on the roof. It was, it wasn't a raccoon, wasn't a possum. Like it sounded like a man's heavy boots on the roof. The thermostat would move on its own. It got to the point where my dad screwed 2 screws on the wall on either side of the needle, because he was tired of the house being bloody hot or bloody cold. And then one morning we came out, the needle was on the other side of the screw.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the washer and dryer would turn on by themselves. And when I was in the basement, in the family room, doing whatever kids do, play, watch TV, I would always see this shadow person out of my peripheral in this doorway to what we called our music room. We had a piano in there. My dad had a big 8-track player with the big speakers that we used to have, like the big huge things. And we found out later that the owner of the home had killed himself in our basement in that room, in the music room. That used to be his bedroom. And that's where I would always see this shadow person. And we found out later that I looked just like his son. The neighbors told me that I was a spitting image of his son. And he used to beat his wife and his son.
Oh, okay.
So we think that he was taking out his rage, or this anger that he still had, out on me, because he might have thought I was his son, right? And I don't think that he knew he was dead. So he was a drunk, a drug user, like probably pills back in the day. And he committed suicide by overdosing on pills and alcohol.
So maybe he didn't intend to kill himself.
The neighbors said he killed himself, suicide, but yeah, he might have just taken it a little too far, right? But I think when they did an autopsy or toxicology or whatever, they found like a ton of pills in him. So usually people with a headache only take 1 or 2 pills. right? They don't take the whole bottle. So that would indicate to me a suicide.
I gotcha. Yeah.
So when I was 13 years old, 13 or 14, my mom and a good friend of hers went to a psychic in Toronto. And do you remember Lauren Green?
Oh,
Remember from Bonanza and Battlestar Galactica?
Oh, yeah.
So Canadian actor, he's from Toronto area, and he used to go to the psychic all the time and raved about this guy. So my mom and her friend got wind of this psychic, and they said, "Oh, let's go to this guy and have some fun." And my mom was into that sort of thing. So when they spoke to his wife on the phone to make an appointment, she said, "Bring pictures of anybody you would like for him to pick up on. And when you walk in the room, place them face down so he can't see them." So like, okay. So my mom gets her reading, and then he pauses and he looks at me and he goes, "Do you know you have a ghost in your house?" My mom was like, "Yeah, what else can you explain? The footprints, the footsteps on the roof, the washer and dryer coming on, the man in the corner that I kept pointing at and screaming about." And he says, "Yeah," he said, "you need to get rid of this guy." He says, "He does not like your son." And he reached over and grabbed my picture and flipped it over. So there's a picture of me, and then there's a picture of my sister. I mean, he had a 50-50 chance, right? But I mean, but it could have been 2 girls, 2 boys. It could have been the picture of the dog and cat. So he connected us with a lady by the name of Carol Davis. I think she's probably been passed on for many, many years. And she was this little lady from Wales. She lived, had moved to Canada. And he said, "She'll get rid of him for you." So we made this appointment for her and her assistant, who used to be a university professor by the name of Ian Curry. And he left the university to study paranormal full time. He was that interested in it and devoted to it. And while the 2 of them were driving to our very rural home, like down dirt roads and surrounded by farmers' fields and forests, this spirit knew they were coming and psychically attacked him while he was driving. And he had to stop the car and turn to her and say, "You got to get this guy off me, like now." So she did whatever Welsh voodoo or she did. And
all I can picture is the old lady in Poltergeist. Go to the light,
Well, this lady was short, but not that short. But they got to the house, and it's my mom and dad, my sister and I, and this lady and this gentleman by the name of Ian Curry are sitting across from me and they're on the couch, and she starts to do her thing. And I've never seen anyone do this since, but she channeled the spirit that was in our house. She became him. Like she let him use her as like a gateway, right?
Yeah, like a speaker. Like she became.
Yeah. And her whole body changed. Her voice changed. Like her voice went deeper, like a man's. She came all like drawn in on herself. She leaned over. She started like retching, like dry retching, and like a drunk, right? And swearing like a trucker. Like I won't repeat it on the podcast here, but you can imagine this foul stuff that would come out of an alcoholic's, an angry alcoholic's mouth, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's happy alcoholics out there too, but she became this guy. He was talking through her. Her voice changed, her demeanor changed, her whole body. I don't even know how to explain it. And this gentleman, Mr. Curry, I guess he had developed some clairvoyant abilities as well. And he kept saying, "Do you see that man in the light?" He said, "You need to go to that man in the light. He'll help you. He'll take the pain away." And this spirit thought, like, he didn't know he was dead. He was in a total state of confusion. And he thought he was in a hospital. He thought he was like in a detox. and he thought that the man in the light, like at the end of the tunnel, was a doctor, and he wanted nothing to do with that, right? He's like, oh, I like my drunken state, I don't want detox, I don't want to, sober up. But they just kept pushing at him and pushing at him. And as soon as he went through the light, she came out of her, whatever she was doing, her channeling, and it was almost like, and I wish I could bottle this sensation because I'd be a millionaire. It almost felt like you were like wading through a swimming pool your whole life, and someone drained the pool for you. Or
Really? Okay.
or you had like a 90-pound backpack on, and someone just said, "Here, let me take that off." And because when I stood up after she was done, I felt like $1,000,000. Like I felt so light, so energized, so good. And my dad did as well. So I guess this guy was affecting him as well in some way that he wasn't aware of. But it just felt fantastic. I'm 13, 14 years old. And I'm like, holy cow, like what's going on here? Like I never experienced anything like that in my life, right? And she taught me a way to quote unquote close my doors. She said to me, because apparently, and we'll talk about this a little bit later too, these spirits can come back if they want to. And if you open yourself up to them, it's like you've got a fishing line with a hook reeling them back in. So at the time, I was just getting into horror movies, Stephen King novels, scary comic books, the whole thing. And she said, you need to stop watching these movies. You need to stop reading these books until you're 21 years old, because you'll open yourself up to him and he can come back and he can just start doing the same nonsense that he was doing before. When you're a 14-year-old kid, you're like, you're killing me, right? But and she taught me how, and I guess I figured it out later as an adult, that I was closing my chakras, right? She had me do it before I went to bed and as soon as I woke up every day. And I did it for years and years, and that was to keep any negative energies away. And I want to say it worked because he never came back. So, and like I can still see her vividly to this day, sitting across, and my dad wasn't much of a believer. Like I thought he was going to grab her by the scruff of the neck and throw her out the front door, right?
Yeah.
But it was that was the start of my paranormal journey, I guess. And then I just kind of put it off, or just kind of put it aside and didn't really think about it. And there have been times where, like, I see spirits all the time, right? And like I've been, like I said, a correctional officer. So I've seen things inside some of the jails. We take inmates to the hospital a lot of times for medical appointments, or whether they slipped in the shower, that kind of thing. And you know what I mean. And I've seen spirits in hospitals, but it doesn't frighten me at all. I just like, oh, okay. Like I remember taking an inmate to the hospital, and he was there for quite a while. I forget, he was having some issues, and so I'm looking inside his room because I'm staying in the hallway outside the door, and there's this little girl. She's like 8 or 9 years old in this little dress sitting at the end of his bed. The spirit. And later on, a few hours later, he starts talking about his daughter that passed away. And I was like, oh, and he started describing her, and I'm just sitting there with my mouth shut.
And that's her.
Biting my tongue, and it was her, and she was visiting her dad in the hospital, right?
Oh my! And did he see her the same as you saw her?
No, my partner didn't see her because he was in the room. But I looked in, I was like, oh, look at that little girl.
Now at that moment, okay, are you like, man, should I tell him that his daughter was here checking up on him? Or do you just, aren't you, wouldn't you be tempted to do, I mean, because sometimes in some respect that might make somebody feel really good.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't know what to make of it. Like, I could see her, but nobody else could. So, and he had already told it, or I'm trying to remember if he had already told us about her, or I can't remember. But I didn't want to upset the guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's still a human being, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's still a dad that lost his little girl, even though he's an inmate, right? But he was in for like, I don't know, something petty, right? But I kind of kept my mouth shut about it, and I didn't know how my partner would react to, right? You get back to the jail, and all these guys think you got to screw loose because you're seeing dead people at the hospital, right? I'm sure that there's a lot of people that are open to that sort of thing, but in that locker room mentality of working in the correctional system, it probably would have just gone south on me, right?
I don't know, man. I don't know. Just think how you could mess with those dudes in there. Say, oh yeah, well, sleep tight. You and your butt. You could really mess with them. Say, mess with
the officers or the inmates, or both.
Both. Mess with the inmates. Like, hey, lights out. I wish you could see who's in the cell with you.
Oh, man.
What are you talking about?
Oh, you could mess with them anyway. Say, oh, did you know a guy died in this cell last week? But that's mean. That's mean, right?
So I can imagine. So there you are, having basically experienced firsthand a haunting, and then some real people coming to sort of do something about it, and then you turn on and see Ghost Adventures and like, well, that's nothing like what I experienced. How did that kind of go through your mind there? How did you process that? Like, how's that compared to what I went through?
Well, I think a lot of times when you're watching Ghost Adventures and these other shows, Ghost Hunters and Ghost Brothers, the people that are experiencing these things. Oh,
I saw it.
See that?
Yeah, I saw it.
So, for your listeners,
somebody's trying to get our attention.
Yes, there's a lot of times when I'm hosting my own podcast where we get visited by spirits that are connected to the people that we're interviewing, and the lights will flicker and I'll see things. So you'll sometimes just see a little orb go by the screen. So, but getting back to your question there, I think
if you see somebody behind me, don't say anything.
All right. The people that experience things, I don't know, like, some of them are really bothered by it. Some of them are like, whatever. Like, they accept their hauntings, and some people love it, right? So it all depends on the attitude of people and their mental states. And I really think the ones that are really bothered by it can really energize these spirits. Like, they feed off energy, right? Because we're all made of energy. They're made of energy. Because you can't destroy energy no matter how hard you try, right?
Yep.
So, but the thing that I like, and you see, like, I love watching Ghost Adventures, even if it's whatever, whether it's a little bit exaggerated or whatever. These guys always come in. They say, "Oh, we need to help these people. They need our help." But after they do their investigation, they just pack up and leave. It's not like they did anything to clear the home, or, sometimes they have the priest there. I can't remember his name right now. Or they have like a medium come in. But for my situation, I dealt with it for years and years and years, until finally someone said, "Yeah, you got to get rid of this guy." So I don't know if we had never got rid of him, or if my mom had never gone to that psychic and he said, "Hey, you've got something at home." Like, who knows what would have happened, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, it could have got worse, or it could have just stayed the same, because we stayed in that house until I was about 19 or 20 years old, and then we moved. But I don't know. Like, I've never really thought about that before either. So what kind of impact it might have had on me or my dad or anybody else, right?
Well, and if you felt it immediately as that energy, okay, left.
Oh yeah.
Because that's what it is. It's a negative energy, and
an oppressive negative energy, right?
Yeah, and you can feel that. I mean, it's like when you go outside before a storm's coming, and you can kind of feel that oppression and that energy. That's here comes some because it's so imagine every day like how that would affect you when you were down yourself, okay, and you come home and maybe something bad happened to you at school, or does it push you over the edge when you get home and you're feeling more negative energy? You wonder how it affects you mentally, because if you could actually feel it being lifted, then imagine what it was doing on a daily basis.
Oh, for sure. Like I said, I felt like $1,000,000. Like I was living in a swimming pool and someone drained it, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, but I guess like since I was being affected, and I guess my dad a little bit, and I am the one who has the experiences, I guess at an early age, like I wonder what would have happened if that lady said, you don't have to suppress anything, just keep on going, right?
Yeah.
Because like years later, like we were talking about before we were recording, I now I've got all these weird clairvoyant abilities. I don't even know what I call them, but did I always have them and I just
because you were closing off your chakra?
Yeah, just closing my doors is what she called it, right?
Like I've heard people say they've blinded their third eye, or and it's probably a similar thought processes to whatever your extrasensory ability that you have. Now I want to ask you this because so you say you go into places and you see ghosts and you see spirits or whatever. How do they appear to you? Because I've asked this to other people because of my own experience with seeing a ghost and how it appeared to me. So I'm wondering how do they appear to you when you see something?
So mostly I see them as an outline.
Okay.
Like you can see that there's an outline in the air. Sometimes I will see them, like the typical Hollywood ghost where they're like 40% there. You could throw your shoe through them or
kind of
walk through them.
Kind of a fading picture of somebody.
Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to think if I've ever seen any in full color, because there's been so many, right? A lot of times I see shadow people all the time. Shadow people love me for some reason. Like they follow me home like crazy. I don't know what it is about me, but I'm always having my house cleared by a very good friend of mine. And she's like, "What's with you and these shadow guys?" Like, and probably one of the most vivid spirits I've ever seen was in a park in my hometown here, and it was like from the navel down to his feet. It looked like a pair of pants, the bottom of a shirt, a pair of pants, and shoes, walking, like no torso.
And you could see.
Oh, it was crystal clear. And the lady I was with, one of the members of our team, she saw it as well. So okay. I was like, oh, that's fantastic, right? Because after a while, you're always like, if you're the guy that sees things all the time in your paranormal team and nobody else sees it, then after a while they're probably like, oh, this guy's just making this stuff up, right? But we both turned and we looked down the path, and there was it looked like a black pair of pants with shoes and a little bit of white shirt, like just above the belt, walking through the bush. And we were looking at it, it was like, yeah, it was wild. And I was like, oh man, that's awesome. Right? Like when I see them, I don't get afraid of them. Like I've seen some wacky, crazy, non-human entities as well. over the
really?
oh
Okay.
yeah, over the years. So oh yeah, I've had some wild experiences. But yeah, they're usually outlines, or I'll know they're there, but I can't see them. Like you sense them, right?
Okay.
So a quick funny story. A few years ago, I went to a psychic reading. He was like this guy. He's from England as well, but he's really good at what he does. He's like booked solid for like 3 years, 4 years for appointments. And he had this talk at a coffee shop, this big, beautiful old coffee shop. And I was the first one there because I hate being late. And I sat in the back because I wanted, to scan, your correctional background. You're the guy with the back against his wall. You want to see everybody coming in the door. So the place filled up. There's like 80 people in there. And here's this guy. He walks in and he starts weaving his way through the chairs. And he stops and he turns his head like an owl, looks right at me, and he goes, "You deal with the dead just like I do." And all these people turned and they're all looking at me, and I'm going, what, he says, "You see them, don't you?" I'm like, "Yeah." He says, "And even when you don't see them, you know that they're there, don't you?" And I was like, "Yep." And he just kept on walking. And he said, "Come see me when you're done." He just kept on going. So like that was a really weird experience. But and I said to him afterward, I said, who told you that? He says, "Oh, the spirits were telling me, like, make sure you talk to that guy over there, like me." So I was like, "Oh, well, that's kind of neat." So yeah, but I really enjoy it, right?
Good, because that would be. I mean, listen, you can either be tormented by it or you can embrace it. I mean, because unless you can turn yourself off again and just ignore, because I got a feeling that even if they'd still be trying to make their presence known, even if you had, you were turned off a little bit. They still be trying it, because they would still know that you could see them or hear them if they could get your attention.
Well, for sure, because we all have that little antenna that we put up, right? That little signal, and that's why some of them are drawn more to people like myself, or maybe people like you, or
no, I have no signal going on.
We'll have to work on that.
That's okay, because and I asked that question because I the one real experience I had with a ghost was, and I didn't know that it was a ghost until I asked where the person I had just seen was, because it was at the post office. It was
that clear, was it?
Oh, I thought it was a little girl standing there by the desk, wow. and she smiled at me.
Oh, I do not trust little kid spirits ever.
Well, and I
ever.
but she was standing right beside the supervisor sitting at the desk. The truck driver walked out. There's a clerk, and I go over to my case, and I'm like, lean back out. And I said, "Hey, where?" And I thought it was the supervisor's daughter, because I had never met her. And I'm just like, "Well, where's your daughter?" And she's like, "My daughter's not here." And I go, "There was a little girl standing right there." Mm. And if I hadn't asked, okay, if it had been one of those, days where I needed to get out of the post office and get home, I'd have thrown my stuff down, left, and just thought that was her daughter. Because it did not look like an outline or half of a person or anything. It looked like a real live person. I mean, I couldn't see through this person, nothing. Wow. And so I asked another psychic medium that we had on, and I go, "So how often does a regular person," because I don't think I have any kind of ability or anything. I just think that was just some random, I don't know, somebody wanted to show themselves to me. Like if you go to the mall, malls don't even exist anymore. If you go to Cedar Point, like we go to Cedar Point up here, where like how many people are you seeing that aren't really there? Maybe sitting on a park bench or staying. How many of those people are not among the living, but are present themselves as the living, and you just don't know because you just walk on by.
Yeah, you never know. Unless they're wearing like some weird period piece.
Yeah.
They're dressed kind of funny, right?
But even like so say I was at Cedar Point or Disneyland or something like that, and I'm using those examples as places that would be just full of people. They could have a period dress on, and you'd think, oh, they must be doing a show in the old West Town.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Never thought about
that. So I just because I think somebody like you or like somebody would have that sense that, okay, something's not right here. There's like a going off on your antenna, but like the average person who doesn't have that and may just be able to see that. I just always wondered, like, how many times do we pass by somebody and just think it's a person and don't know any different?
Yeah, you never know. You never know. But, ghosts are everywhere. Spirits are everywhere. Like, I don't know if you're an investigator or not, or you just do this podcast, but I guarantee I could go into any home in North America, Canada, the US, wherever, do some EVPs and get something. Because you're going to have loved ones around you. You're going to have grandparents, aunts and uncles, maybe a buddy from high school that passed away years ago, and they're going to be there. Like, I've seen spirits at restaurants. Like, I saw one at Subway. Like, I was eating my sandwich, and there was one standing near the till. And I was joked that maybe the guy's like, oh, I wish I could dig into like a 12-inch roast beef, or no. I've seen them in restaurants and pubs, hospitals, office buildings, parks, right? Like it just said.
Now, do they always know that you can see them?
Probably.
Do they always try to, because Have heard, we've had people on who said, they try to hide from the people they know that can see them. Mm. Now, have you ever like seen somebody and then they kind of like, oh crap, you can see me, I need to slink away? Or do they try to get your attention, or they just hope,
You do get that, the peek around the doorway a lot. I hope my wife never listens to this podcast, but like in my basement, my family room here, in my alcove, out into the to where the stairs and everything else is, I see spirits there all the time, and I don't know if they're family or just spirits from the neighborhood that are looking in on me because I've got this signal up, but I get the old peekaboo around the corner all the time, every day. And I don't acknowledge them. Sometimes I'll look at them and I'll see the outline of somebody, or I'll see a dark shadow go by, but I'm just like, hey, whatever. So I'll tell you a story. These shadow people. I had a spirit. I think it was a male spirit, like a dark. I'm like dark. I'm not talking like satanic, but like dark clothing or whatever. Kept going back and forth between the couch where I was sitting and the TV, and I was getting annoyed. And I finally paused the TV and I said, "Listen," I said, "either sit down and watch the show with me, or bugger off." And Shane, I swear to God, I could see this spirit walk over to the couch and sat down beside me. And I said, "There, now sit your ass down and quit bugging me." And I talked to a friend of mine who's a really powerful psychic medium. She's like, "Oh, don't ever do that." She says, "You're inviting them into your home." And I'm like, he was already in my home. I said, he was pissing me off. I was trying to watch whatever. So I told him to sit down, and he did. So.
Boy, what if the ghost doesn't like what you're watching?
That's bad. Then go haunt someone else's house.
Oh, right? And so you wonder, like, now, are they able to communicate with you, or you just see them and know they're there?
I do get messages sometimes. I'll get names. I'm really good with names. Like, if you and I were talking and I'd say, hey, who's Jason, right? And you might go, oh, that's my uncle who passed away, or I'll go, who's Mike? Oh, that's my dad.
Now be
right?
careful saying Jason on our show, because everybody's going to think, oh my God, did Jason just die?
No, Jason, if you're listening, don't go into the light, buddy. But
because like that, like, do you just want to say, dude, what are you doing? Like, what are you, like, was he going back and forth because he was trying to hide, or he was trying to get your attention?
It's like he was pacing. Like back and forth, and finally just, like I said, sit down or bugger off, right?
Oh boy, that would.
But yeah, I mean, and sometimes I get flooded with images, especially if we're doing like at a place doing an investigation, and sometimes it doesn't work at all. So I'm not sure if I'm doing something wrong, or you got to be in a certain state of mind or open up, but I don't know. Like, I'd love to do it professionally. I'd love to charge $150 an hour to do readings for people, but
you don't have that. So would you? Okay, so if you woke up tomorrow and you couldn't see a ghost anymore, would it make you sad, or would you be like,
I think so, because I kind of like being that guy that can see dead people.
You like being the ghost guy?
I like being the ghost guy in my town, right? So, and I'll freak people out. Like, sometimes if we're like in an old pub or an old restaurant, like a steakhouse or something, and I see somebody moving around, like, I'll go to the waitress. I'll say, hey, what's with all the ghosts in here? And there's their faces, because they'll be like, oh my God, we see stuff all the time, or what are you seeing, right? And so, or they'll be like, oh, we don't like going into the basement to get our supplies or whatever, and because there's this nasty spirit down there. And I'm like, oh, is this name like Randy or Russell or something? And they were like, oh yeah, that's the old owner. Like, he died 20 years ago, and blah blah blah. So, but like I said, I don't know how it works. I'll have to figure it out one day.
Wow. I mean, that's just, it's very, it just see, I mean, I don't know that I don't know if I have the nerve to because like I said, I saw what I thought was a person, and you said that about, like, there's a restaurant and deli in our town that I go a lot of times for lunch on the mail route, and it wasn't that long ago where I walked in and I could see, like, where you walk in, you could see I was going to the bathroom, and I saw somebody flash across the hallway, go into the bathroom. I walked into the bathroom, and there's motion on it's a motion light that comes on, and the light was on, and there was nobody in there. And I would have, I'm looking as I walk, so I would have seen if somebody came back out. And so I'm like, oh boy, that's
a spirit for sure.
Yeah. So I walked back out, and I know the people that own it. It's a super popular place, and I went up to pay for my stuff, and I asked the cashier. I said, you ever see the ghost that's back there in that? And she goes, what'd you see? She's like grinned and goes, what'd you see? And here, what's weird is that this restaurant place is in one side of the parking lot. It originally was on the other side of the parking lot, burnt down, and they rebuilt it. And it's like, so it's on the same property, but it's kind of like, 50 yards away. And so what I finally got out of them was that they think this is a guy who it's named after, and he was actually a mailman too, and would come. His family owned the place, and he would come and cut meat. It's a bratwurst place, and he would cut meat after his mail route. And they said they kind of think that that's him, like he's in the back, and he's always walking around like back where he would be working.
And he saw a fellow postal carrier, and he's like, hey.
I have no idea, but every time I walk in there now, I'm like, sometimes I don't want to look up because I don't want to.
Without saying anything, do you know his name? His first name?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Does it start with an R?
No. But if you're saying the name, it has an R.
Well,
I don't think I guess I gotta be honest. I don't know what his first name is. I know what they called him.
you don't have a Roy or a Rory connected to you, do
you? No.
No? Okay.
Don't
Sometimes names just pop in my head and I gotta ask, right?
don't.
So
Boy, I don't know.
who's the guy standing behind you?
There's
I'm kidding. There's nobody there.
No, that's good. But I just want, so it makes me wonder, like, how many people see stuff and just don't realize
I
it.
think more people see stuff than we realize, or a lot of people don't let on because it weirds them out, or they're going to think they're going to get ridiculed or whatever. But I think a lot of people are opening up more to this kind of stuff, like paranormal stuff, even like the Sasquatch stuff and the UFOs, and look at all the stuff that the governments are releasing now.
Exactly. I mean,
you can't really prove that ghosts exist, can you? You really can't.
Well,
right?
Because it doesn't matter.
UFOs are a lot easier because these fighter jets have cameras on them.
Yeah.
And,
But it doesn't matter, because no matter what evidence you present, there's always going to be somebody that is a naysayer. However, I think there's a lot more. And when we started our podcast, we kind of found out that either somebody had an experience or they knew somebody that had an experience. It's not like I know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. It's either you had one or you know somebody that had one. There's 1 degree of separation most of the time. And it's either you want to, you're either comfortable talking about it, or, and I'm sure you get this too, because I've heard Wes mention it. Is that there's a lot of people who come on, get a hold of me. They have stories to tell, but they just want to tell me the stories. They don't want to go on a podcast. They don't want to tell anybody else.
They just want to get it off their chest to someone who will listen, right?
And I did convince the one guy. I'm like, listen, because where he lived, I'm like, listen, you need to, if you can muster up the courage, you need to tell this story, because we need to know if other people are experiencing this. And I don't think, until people understand, as good as it makes them feel to get it off their chest, imagine if you're the person that is listening to the show and hears the same sort of experience that somebody else had, and then you're like, oh my God, I'm not crazy. This other person had it. Mm-hmm. That you're not making yourself feel better. The odds are you're making somebody else feel better by telling your story. And that's the only way we're probably ever going to get to the bottom of some of this stuff is getting more people to share their experiences.
For sure.
There's a guy we had on the show from Southern Ohio who had a crazy Bigfoot experience, and he was messaging me last night. We were kind of talking, and he's works with a guy who had a literal face-to-face, and he's okay telling him the story, but he's like, man, I don't want to go on that show. I don't want to go on the show. And he's like, listen, you don't understand. This would be a great thing to share. And he's like, I just don't want to do it. Maybe you can tell my story. Tell my story. But it also is so traumatizing, I'm sure, to people.
Yeah, depending on your mindset.
Mm-hmm. Because ghosts are one thing.
Yeah, you either really accept it and go, holy cow, that was amazing, or you just block it out of your head and go, I never want to talk about that again. Right?
Yeah, and I think as a is a human being, it's probably easier to accept, especially if you're religious. Okay, you have to almost believe in ghosts and spirits and stuff. That's what it's based. That's what our religion is almost based upon. That there's an afterlife and that we're spirits. But when you start talking about,
but it's a lot different than what the Bible says, right? Like the stuff that I experienced.
Yes, yeah. But
I don't, and that's a whole other podcast, right?
Yeah.
So
yes, but at the same time, you're open to that possibility of us dying not being the final chapter of our existence.
Right.
But when you start talking about a 8-foot monkey running around out in the woods, that's not supposed to exist. And then when you talk about UFOs, you kind of think, yeah, they're there, but the government will take care. The government will take care.
Or or a lot of people say, oh, they're not extraterrestrials, they're fallen angels, they're demons. It's like, I don't think so. We live in an infinite universe, and for us to think that we're the only ones here, that's pretty ignorant thinking, right? Like, why couldn't God, whatever you believe in, the universe, why couldn't it or he or she have created other planets with other people, other beings, right? Like, why stop at us, right?
Yeah.
We're certainly not perfect.
Well, we're as a species, we're pretty arrogant. And
we think we're the center of the universe.
Exactly. But, I mean, I know enough people that if that was the case, there's all kinds of more. There's all kinds of universes.
Then you start getting into the interdimensional stuff and the Mandela effect and all sorts of wild stories. But you know what? It makes for an interesting podcast and topic, and right.
Oh, definitely.
You'll never run out of, or you and I will never run out of content.
Exactly. So. But there is a couple. So there's a couple experiences that I do want you to touch on, and one of them is your run-in with a quote unquote little person.
I knew you were going to ask me this one. So
because I'm fascinated. I think if anything is real, as far as it's the little. I mean, what else can you attach the stories to fairies and gnomes and trolls through? I mean, there's got to be little people throughout history that.
Well, and it's a huge thing in some cultures, right? Like in Iceland,
absolutely.
People build little homes for them. They put them out in their backyards.
They deviate roads because they think there's a gnome or a troll or whatever living places.
Yeah, like even in Newfoundland, there's a big culture of fairies, and
there you go.
And people, and we've talked to people and said, oh yeah, we used to play with them when we were kids, and wow,
God,
it's like what, But so this happened way before I even got back into the paranormal or interested in ghosts or anything, and it's a story I kept to myself for a long, long time because I knew nobody was going to believe me, right? It's one thing to say, oh yeah, I saw a ghost or whatever, but when you say you saw like an 18-inch tall little guy standing in the bush, people are going to go, okay, dude, like, what have you been smoking, right? But this happened, I'm going to say, maybe 12 or 13 years ago. I was coming home from work. It was about 3:30 in the afternoon, beautiful sunny day. And this highway that I drive up, it's part of the Niagara Escarpment, and I know that won't mean a lot to your listeners, but it's kind of like a rocky, hilly area, and there's a cave system at the top of this hill, and there's hiking trails, and people go up there, on their bikes and take their dogs for walks and all sorts of stuff. And I've never been in there because, never had any reason to, but I was driving northbound on this highway. It's like a two-lane highway, like a country road almost, but it's paved. And I've got the window down, I've got my arm hanging out. It's a beautiful, warm day. And I looked over, and it's all bush, like hardwood forest. And I looked over, and there's this guy, this man, he's about 1.5 feet tall, standing in the ditch, like amongst the tall grass and the ferns and everything else. And like right behind him is the forest. And it's really close to this cave system. And I looked over, and he almost looked, because I know you're going to ask me to describe him. He was wearing like, and this sounds so cliche, like a deer skin hide vest, these red furry arms, like he was like squirrel, like red squirrel fur.
Okay.
And he, that ventriloquist Jeff Dunham,
Yeah.
With the terrorist. I kill you, that guy. So his old man, Walter. I think it's Walter.
Okay. Yeah.
The old man puppet. This guy looked like Walter, but with black hair. Like he almost looked like Native American, Native Canadian,
Okay.
or Eastern European, like those hard features, the big cheekbones, the squinty eyes, and his hair was like jet black, and it was receding, like the puppet Walter. Like like I swear he looks just like him. And I looked over, and we locked eyes. He was looking right at me, and I looked at him, and in my head I'm like, what the hell am I looking at? And of course I'm driving home, and there's other cars in front of me, so I had to turn my head to make sure I'm not going to rear end anybody. So I looked real quick to the front of the car, and I looked back. He was gone. And I was like, what the hell did I just see? And I kept that to myself for the longest time, like years and years and years. And then I met another gentleman from my area who told me about seeing this little person. And I go, can you describe him? And I never told him about my sighting. And he says, well, and this is hours away from where we live. Like he was actually on a Sasquatch expedition all by himself, and like a few hours east of here. And he said, well, he was walking down this trail, and he stopped because he noticed something to the right of him, and he looked over, and he said there was this little man about 18 inches tall, just had his sun or his face to the sun. Like you stop and he just gets like some rays for a second, enjoying the warm breeze. And I said, what do you look like? He said, oh, he's wearing a deerskin jacket with these red furry sleeves. And that's exactly what the guy I saw was wearing. But he said he was also wearing a cap, like the Robin Hood style cap.
Oh, I get you. Yeah.
And I said, what did you do? And he says, I said hello. And he said, as soon as he said hello, like he startled this little guy, took him by surprise. Because I don't think you can sneak up on these little people very easily, right? He said he freaked out. He ran behind another tree, and he started snarling at him and shaking his fist at him. And he thought, he said, I need to get the hell out of here. He says he's gonna have 50 of his closest friends show up, and
oh geez,
they're gonna pelt me with little spears and rocks, and it's gonna be like a Gulliver's Travel kind of thing, right? But after he told me that, and he described this little person, and he was wearing exactly what the guy I saw, I was like, oh, okay, I believe it now. Like there's no, like when people, what's the word I'm looking for? Like when they can, like if you and I saw the same UFO, right? Then we can go, oh, okay, like there's something to this, right?
When we can
confirm or compare, right?
Yeah.
And we hadn't talked to each other before, so there's none of this, oh, you guys contrived. Yeah, that's the word there's no, contriving the story. So it was weird. And we've had people on the show, a lady named Robin Moonshadow. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's been on a ton of podcasts, and she's like an expert on little people of the forest. And she's got like little footprints, photographs, all sorts of cool stuff. Oh yeah. She's a very interesting lady. So she talks about the puckwudgies.
Oh yeah.
And the goblins and the trolls and all sorts of stuff. And you know what? The legends have to come from somewhere.
Kind of what
Right.
we always talk about, is especially the little people stories, and there's so many different incantations of them, and it's like, well, there has to be a basis to that. There has to be an origin story, and it has to be based in some sort of truth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, however many hundreds of years later anybody remembers that, which they don't seem to, unless you see one. And then, even then, I mean, like you said, you really have to do a triple take because like a little person compared to seeing a 9-foot tall, 800-pound creature, you're going to buy that, probably the Bigfoot type size, because there's animals like that. There's other things that you can experience that are that massive,
Right?
but there's nothing that you can wrap your mind around living in the woods or out in nature that's 1.5 feet high, dressed in clothes.
Yeah, no kidding.
That just isn't. That's even way farther of a truth to try to grasp.
Yeah, and who knows? They might be interdimensional. They might be, who knows, magical, for lack of a better word.
Well, to hear the Native Americans talk about them, they obviously have been around, or part of their culture too.
And they had nothing to gain from telling those stories, right? It wasn't like they were going to get picked up by Inside Edition or Entertainment Tonight.
I hope I get a show. I get a show on the Travel Channel right after Josh Gates, and it's going to be In Search of Little People.
In Search of Little People.
It's oh my gosh.
That'd be a one-of-a-kind show, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely would be.
If there's any producers listening right now, Shane and I will be the two guys that go tromping through the bush looking for little people.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Because, like I said, I think they really freak me out, the whole idea. Because, there could be one under the desk right now. I wouldn't even,
Nope.
Until he already had a hold of me.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't even know. So the other thing I really wanted to touch on is, and I think it was in a message you sent me about your clairvoyance in Bigfoot.
Oh, okay. The remote viewing.
Yes.
So this is one of those things that I couldn't figure out how it works. It doesn't work all the time. If anybody, so remote viewing, for people who might not know, it's not the same as astral projection. Astral projection is almost like when your spirit leaves your body, you fly like Superman across the sky, kind of thing. I've been trying for years to try and do it, no success yet. It's on my bucket list. But remote viewing is almost like where you take your subconscious, you put it somewhere else, and you can see things, but you can still react in real time. Like, there were times where I'd be remote viewing a home, looking for a spirit, and my friend John was doing the same thing. And we live 2 hours away, and we're texting each other. We're like, "Oh, do you see the spirit in the bathroom, or the one that just ran into the laundry room?" And like, "Oh yeah," we're texting each other, but we're still can slip in and out of the remote viewing. So I'm a member of Ontario Sasquatch, and it's a Sasquatch research team based out of North Bay, Ontario, which is about 4 hours north of here, north of Toronto. And they get a ton of Bigfoot sightings up there. So the gentleman who runs Ontario Sasquatch, his name is Peter Smith. He asked John and I, my other friend, who he used to be on the podcast until he had to leave. He has some crazy abilities as well, like the remote viewing. And so I didn't know that Peter had asked him to do it at the same time as he asked me. So I in this room, just over my shoulder here, I sat down on my big lazy boy, reclined myself, and I think it was I want to say it was the fall, spring or fall. I don't remember, but it was, weather was good. There's no, and I think it was around 5 or 6 o'clock at night. And I closed my eyes and I told myself, take me to this location that this Peter Smith had asked me. And at first I was above the trees looking down, and everything was full color. I could see rocks, I could see water, I could see the tops of these trees. And it was the fall because I could see the colors, the fall colors. I remember that now. Sorry, it was like September or October. And I found myself standing on the forest floor, and it wasn't in color, but everything was in like black and white. But so it's really hard to explain. So the sky was black. Like I said, it was like 6 o'clock at night. The sun doesn't go down till 8:30, 9 o'clock in the fall, I think. The trees were like a cobalt blue. The leaves were blue. The sky was black. It was almost like if you went to a chalkboard with a cobalt blue colored piece of chalk and drew on it. It kind of looked like that.
Okay.
And I don't know if the timing was just right or something drew me in, but to my right, a doorway opened, like a regular door, like a rectangular shaped door, like everybody has in their home, and it was blue, like this grayish cobalt blue, and in the doorway, and I swear on the lives of my kids, there's this Sasquatch standing there. It had the conical head, like the pointy type head, and he was looking right at me, and he was not happy. Like he was giving me the stink eye, like you wouldn't believe. And he walked out of the doorway, and he walked right past me, and I kind of watched him go, and he was watching me the whole time. And then I looked because something out of the corner of my eye drew my attention back, and there's this adolescent Sasquatch, like a kid, like a teenager, right? And I'm a tall guy. I'm 6'7". And this adolescent Sasquatch that I was remote viewing, and they knew I was there. That's the crazy part. And I don't know how they saw me, but they knew I was there for sure. This adolescent, he was about 6 feet tall, maybe 5'10", 6 feet, came right up to my face. And it was like, see the monkeys at the zoo when they're curious, and they're tilting their head and they're excited. And he was like right in my face, like inches away. And he's just the color blue, like this cobalt blue. And he's like looking at me and tilting his head. And his mother, and he had a flat topped head, it wasn't conical. And this mother, well, I assume a female, she was about my height. She came over, she grabbed him and pulled him away. And then 3 more Sasquatches, bigger than, one bigger than the other, came out of this doorway, which I'm going to call it a portal. And they all looked at me, gave me this like this look like, what the hell are you doing here kind of thing. And they walked away, like to my left, and then boom, I opened my eyes and I was like, that didn't happen. I said, there's no way. But I couldn't imagine that. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, why would you imagine it?
Well, I would imagine like four males, a female, and an adolescent, in a doorway.
Yeah,
because I do think they are interdimensional. I think they're more paranormal than they are flesh and blood, because you see photos where people are tracking them in the snow or in the sand, and the footprints abruptly stop. And it's like, well, you're in the middle of a field, a helicopter didn't pick it up. Where did he go? He just disappeared, right?
And I know they do great things physically, but can they jump 50 yards?
Yeah, for sure. So I met up with this crew, the Sasquatch crew in North Bay, maybe about 4 weeks later. And the one gentleman, his name is Jim. He's been going in there for years. This is the one location. He gifts them. He leaves them peanut butter. He leaves them chocolate, all sorts of stuff. He's seen one, about a 9-foot tall one a few years ago. And I stopped him. I said, and I didn't tell him about the remote viewing thing, because just like the little guy, the little person, people are kind of look at you like you've got a screw loose, even though you're out in the bush looking for Sasquatch, right? Like people have their limits or their right. Yeah. So I said,
I'm crazy, but you are all different.
Yeah. So I said to them, I said, Jim, I said, how many do you think are in here? And he turns to me, he says, I think there's 4 males, a female, and an adolescent. And I was like, in my head, I was like, holy crap, that's what I saw. 4 males, a female, and an adolescent. And I was blown away, right? So, and I asked John about what he had seen. And he said when he remote viewed the same area, everything was in black and white, not like black and blue like I saw. And he said he saw one, a big one, like probably the alpha. And he came up behind him in his remote viewing form, and he said it was walking away, and it stopped. The moment John said he remote viewed, it stopped. Like it knew he was there, and it just kind of looked over its left shoulder, waved its hand at him, like if you're going to swat a fly away from your head, and John was pushed out of the bush and opened his eyes back up in his living room. It's almost like it knew he was there, and it dismissed him, like, get away, get out of my bush, get out of my forest.
And you would so you would surmise that only something that was on a spiritual sort of plane, supernatural sort of, could do something like that,
or would know that he and I were there.
Yeah. Well, how else would they? Unless, and I've kind of thrown this out here. If we think that Sasquatch are human, have a more of a human element than they do animal.
Yeah.
Well, okay, if you can remote view and you can see ghosts, and we think they're part here, why couldn't they do the same thing?
So let me tell you. So I stayed at a hotel up in North Bay. And
don't tell me it's a Holiday Inn Express and now you're an expert.
No. Okay. I think it was a Best West. I think it was a Best Western.
Okay.
But I'm in my room. It's at night. I ordered a pizza. I'm sitting on the bed watching TV, chowing down on my pizza. And I swear to God, this huge brownish colored shadow thing showed up at the end of the bed. And it was pacing back and forth. And it was almost the same height as the ceiling. They're like 9-foot ceilings in there, right? 8-foot ceilings. And I'm watching it go back and forth, and in my head I went, that's a Sasquatch remote viewing me, checking me out, because we were in their back, like I remote viewed them, then I visited them in their backyard, literally, right?
And he was coming to tell you he could do the same thing.
Yeah, or he was just checking me out to see if I was to be trusted, or if I was, whatever goes on in their head, right? But I will swear up and down that they're more paranormal than flesh and blood. They're not like the Sasquatch community love to eat its own, right? They're
exactly.
Like the paranormal community are like family, but when you get the Bigfoot people and the UFO people in the same room,
but there's
going to be a fight.
It goes to the comment you just said. Okay, is that some of the Bigfoot people don't want to be made fun of by people thinking that, oh my God, we're not just talking about a great big giant ape, we're talking about a interdimensional or a paranormal. Exactly. That's crazy. You can't talk like that.
Yeah. So how many people say they see these strange lights when they see Sasquatch? We saw them that same night. We saw these orbs going through the trees, and we're watching like these basketball-sized orbs going through the trees. And I said, that's them. That's the cloaked or whatever their vibrational rates or.
But I don't consider you paranormal. Okay, I'm sitting here talking to you. I can see you. I don't consider you paranormal, yet you can see ghosts and you can remote view. So why is it a bad thing? I mean, I know that's how you're describing their attributes that we think that they're, but if they can do the same things that you can do, and you're still flesh and blood, and you have this ability through whatever in your head or your spirit or whatever, it doesn't make it a bad thing. It just makes them more like us. If that's what some of us can do, and not every one of us, and maybe not every Bigfoot can do that. I don't know, but if you can do that, and we think they are somehow tied to us as far as in the whatever chain of evolution, that they're somewhere between what came before them and us, well, they have to have the same sort of attributes that we, especially they don't look like us, so why wouldn't they mentally and spiritually be like
for sure
us?
Maybe they see ghosts too.
I'm sure they do. I mean, and maybe they thought you were a ghost. Well,
when I was remote viewing them, for sure. I think they knew what I was doing, because that one that visited me in the hotel room.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't a shadow person. Like what kind of 9 foot tall, brownish colored?
Well, let's hope. Let's hope it's not. Yeah. But just like you were annoyed with the dude walking back and forth.
Yeah.
Okay.
They told him to sit his ass down, right?
Yeah. They're annoyed. They think, okay, we're going from point A to B. Oh God, here's another one of these guys. And I do want to, people that listen to the podcast and may not understand, they may think remote viewing is just some sort of craziness. Our government spent a lot of money.
$28 million, the Stargate project.
Yes, experimenting.
And don't tell me that they got rid of it.
Oh,
I'm sure the Canadian secret intelligence people do it. I'm sure the CIA does it. MI6, everybody.
I'm sure they all. Because you're not the only person that can do it.
No. And I don't. And you know what? No one's ever taught me to do it. I don't know how it works. Sometimes I can do it. Sometimes I can't. Like, I've tried so many times to remote view the Sasquatch up in North Bay. Again, can't do it. I don't know if they've got something blocking me, or I don't know.
Well,
I don't
once
know how
again,
if
you can block stuff off, why can't they? And
sure.
And in their realm, you might be the same thing as a ghost or a spirit coming to them in that form, because who knows what remote viewing really is, but you can't just dismiss the fact that it may be your actual spirit traveling through whatever means to another place. And if you can block you can block bad spirits from entering your space. Maybe they can block your spirit because how else could you? It's got to be just to try to even imagine that. It's got to be something from within your subconscious that travels.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
Listen. I've read some books on, where in some of the stuff we do, you're always big on visualizing something in kind of making it. No, I don't want to say making it, but if you want something to happen, if you want to produce something, as far as like in some of the things I do, like songwriting and the movie stuff, you have to visualize it. Okay. And the more you visualize it and think about it and put it out there, it kind of attracts the stuff that you need to help make that stuff happen. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, where does that stuff go? You know what I'm saying? There's has to be some sort of energy field that those thoughts or those feelings or whatever travel to attract back the stuff that you want to come back to you. Because I do believe that when people say the law of attraction, Well, that I think that sort of goes into that. You put those feelings or those thoughts out there, and maybe it's a form of energy that, like you said, connects with other forms of energy. So how else can you explain how you can go and see what's going on other than.
And I have another crazy remote viewing story that I'd love to share too.
Sure.
So I mentioned my buddy John. He used to be one of the hosts on our podcast as well, but he had to leave because he was just too far into the paranormal, and he's like a magnet for bad stuff. I don't know why. I draw shadow people. He draws things that are even scarier. And so he was tormented for years by a poltergeist, a human spirit that would assault him nightly, punch him, smack him, twist his foot to the point where he'd wake up screaming in pain, all sorts of nasty things. It would put messages in his head like, I'm going to kill you, tons of terrible, terrible things.
He knew my ex-wife?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I'm sorry.
Was her name Big John?
Oh boy.
Yeah. So anyway, and this thing followed him home from a rental property that he had purchased, and he was doing renovations. He was going to flip the house, and then it followed him home and was doing terrible things to him constantly for years. And John discovered that he had all these psychic abilities as well, like remote viewing, seeing spirits. Like he could see things even better than I could. And his house was full of terrible, terrible things. And we can get into that later. So once we discovered we could both remote view at the same time, the same location, we started helping people remove spirits from their homes, human spirits, like not non-human demonic stuff. And like people would contact us and say, yeah, there's something going on in my house, and they would send us photos of the interior of the home, so we had something to base our remote viewing on. And we would go in there and we'd convince these human spirits to leave and that sort of thing. So the one night John texts me and he says, let's go after this other spirit. They called him Big John because he was huge, massive spirit, like taller than me. So John says, he texts me and he says, picture a house with a porch, overhang porch, screen door. I'm in the room. He's in the room to the left. So, like I said, I don't know how it works. Sometimes it works beautifully. Sometimes it doesn't work at all. So I closed my eyes and boom, I was on this porch of this house, and I went through the screen door and I turned to the left, and there's this spirit of this guy in the corner, and he's looking right at me, like with a holy crap look on his face. Like I didn't know these guys could do that. And in my subconscious form or my astral form or whatever, I went right at him and just started laying the beats to him. I was feeding him uppercuts. I slammed him against the wall. I threw him on the ground. And then, so I have two uncles that have long since passed, but they are kind of like with me quite a lot. They've helped us remove spirits, and they're spirits themselves. So I've got this guy on the ground, this spirit, and I'm laying the boots to him. I give him soccer kicks, and I look up, and there's my two uncles, and they've each got this guy, one under each arm, and they dragged him out the door like two bouncers dragging a jerk out of a bar. And I swear to God, no word of a lie, they went like up into the sky, like Superman. They're holding on to him, and they're gone. And you know what? And the first thing I said to and I look over in the corner, the other corner of the room, and there's John standing there. And he looks like he's winded from being in a fight. And we're looking at each other. So we're remote viewing. We live hours away. And we're remote viewing the same location. I just kicked the crap out of this dude. Like this dead dude. Like a spirit. We're looking at each other. And I opened my eyes and I went, man, you've got one hell of a imagination. Like, I'm trying to convince myself there's no way that happened. John texts me 20 seconds later. He says, was that you kicking him when he was down, or is that one of your uncles? And I was like, holy cow. And I said, John, you're wearing a black t-shirt, blue jeans, and white running shoes. He says, yep. He says, bang on. And he said, that was wild. He says, watching you lay the beats to that guy. He says, then your uncle's coming in. And I was like, wow. So like we literally beat the shit, pardon my language, out of a ghost in our subconscious form. And my two uncles, who are spirits themselves, came in and said, we got this. And they dragged him out of the house, right out the front door, past the porch, and up into the sky like Superman. And for John and I to look at each other while we're doing it, and he's saying, like, I never told him anything. Like, he texted me 10 seconds later, 20 seconds later. Was that you kicking him while he was down, or was that your uncle? And me to describe exactly what he's wearing. That's crazy.
Well, it's, because you're even questioning yourself. Like,
yeah, for sure. You have to, right? Because I'm like, oh man, that was quite the imagination I had. And then we started to describe the room that we were in. Like, oh yeah, there's a fireplace at one end, and there's a bookshelf, and there was like, yellow walls, and it's like, holy cow. and I'm screaming at this guy, this spirit, in my head while I'm pounding him, saying, you need to get the hell out of here. Stop bothering people. Like, and he's looking at me like he couldn't even believe what was happening. Right? Because he knows we're not spirits. Because he's been tormenting poor John for years. And he's had a go at me once. So wild. Crazy.
That is that's good. It's crazy.
So,
holy moly.
And that and the Sasquatch remote viewing are the two most profound experiences I've had in my life. Like, just like mind blowing.
I can't even imagine. I mean, and I got a good imagination. Okay. But it's just like, I know, like, you can, you close your eyes and you kind of think and you meditate but when you have somebody else telling you, confirming what you saw in your own mind, in your own subconscious, that's just craziness.
Yeah. And looking at each other, right?
Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah. Holy smokes.
Yeah. So John and I, we've had psychics tell us that we were connected in a past life, like a few times, friends or family or whatever. So it was no coincidence that we came together, right? And he was a client, like, of the paranormal team, because he was being tormented by this human spirit that was smacking him every night and tormenting the hell out of him. And like, his house, I mean, even beyond that spirit, he had crazy things in this home, like stuff you wouldn't believe. But it was nice that we could confirm, right? He would take a picture, like he'd be sitting there watching TV and he'd see something in his dining room or whatever, and he'd take a picture and he'd send it to me, and I'd be like, oh. I said, what's that? Like, that's a creepy looking. I could see it in the photo, right? Like, I remember you've heard of the Hat Man shadow person.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
He had a nasty visit from the Hat Man. And he took a picture one night of the stairs going up to the bedrooms. He says, oh, look at this spirit or this shadow person trying to go up the stairs. I looked at the picture and I said, well, what about the Hat Man in the dining room? And you could see, like, clear as day, this silhouette of this dude wearing this fedora. And he was like, "Oh shoot, I didn't even see him. I was looking at the other creepy thing going up the stairs."
Good gravy.
Yeah. So
I've heard some Hat Man stuff, and that's not.
yeah, he showed up at my house the one night.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because John and I were so connected, they would follow. They would come check me out. They'd go check him out. So, but there's this thing where they don't scare me. Like the area that I told you about, where the door, the vestibule there to go through into the other area of the house. He was standing right there looking at me, and I looked at him and I said, "Get the F out of here. You're not welcome." And he didn't budge. So I got up and I walked right through him, because I wanted to go upstairs and get a snack or a drink or whatever, or use the bathroom. And I said, and as I walked through him, I said, "Get out of my way." He never came back. I'm the boss, right? It's my house. And if any, like for your listeners and mine, I tell them about this all the time. If you have something at home and it's making you uncomfortable, or you're just not, things are happening that you don't like. The first thing is, and I'm a bad example for this, is acknowledgement is empowerment. So if you acknowledge them, you're empowering them. So if you have stuff happening at home, if you can ignore it, if you can get your mindset in the right place and ignore it, they can't feed off you, right? You're going to become boring to them, because they want your reaction. They want you to energize them, like with your fear or your anxiety. Yeah. So
you don't give them something to feed off of.
Exactly. And I know it's tough, like especially if you see something like float through the air or something move on a table, or you're seeing, blips of movement out of your peripheral. Ignore it as best you can. Don't scream at them. Don't, you always hear about people saying, I think if I swear at them and scream at them, then they love that, because you're just giving them energy to use. So acknowledgement is empowerment. Ignore them the best you can.
That's good advice.
So,
well, I want to, gosh, we could talk forever, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure. I got stories. I got stories all day.
Well, I want, speaking of stories, tell everybody about your book.
So, I'm with a publishing company called Beyond the Fray. They're based out of San Diego, I believe. Great company, great publishing company. And they specialize in paranormal and true crime. And I sent them my book, and it's all about my experiences, everything from when I was talking about when I was a little kid to the remote viewing and all sorts of other stuff in between. And I sent them my transcript or manuscript or whatever you want to call it on a Friday. By Monday, they were like, "We want to sign you." I was like, holy cow. I thought it was, usually it takes like 6 months to a year for them to even look at your stuff, but I guess it just hit at the right time and they were all excited about it. It's called Strange Happenings, a paranormal investigator's story. Or you can just type in Dan Hammond in Amazon. I'm on Kindle as well. And I think it's like $17. And I want to say it's a great book. I've got lots of great reviews so far. And if you love the paranormal and you love spooky stuff, and you've got I got Bigfoot in there, I've got poltergeists, I have non-human entities in there, all sorts of things. A UFO sighting.
Well, if the book is half as good as the stories that you've just shared, then it's worth every bit of $17-18 and then some.
Right.
And then some.
So I'll put you down for a dozen copies then.
Oh, sure. I gotta work my day off tomorrow at the post office, so that'll easy. I can buy.
There you go. 18. You'll probably be the one delivering it to yourself.
Oh, gee, thanks. Oh, I better rethink that then. Holy smoke. Well, tell everybody then where they can find your podcast. I mean, I'm sure they can find it everywhere, and then do you guys have like a website or anything that people can get a hold of you if they got some stories they want to share?
Yeah. So it's called Phantom Faction. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram, like if you want to get a hold of us. Email is phantomfaction@outlook.com. And I'm more than happy to have some of your listeners on if they've got some stories to tell. What was I going to say? You can find us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and any podcast hosting site in the world, pretty much. Phantom Faction Podcast. And we'd love
I hope our listeners, I mean, the episodes of yours that I've listened to are, now I'm just going to butter your biscuit a little bit. They're not nearly as entertaining as hearing your stories, because I think your stories are fantastic. but it's a great podcast. I mean, you guys, and I think you find that when you listen to, none of us really have the same guests on. We all have different guests. So that just goes to show you how many people have these experiences, whether it's Bigfoot or little people or ghosts or UFOs or whatever. And it's it's awesome to hear people sharing this stuff on all these different platforms.
And if you're here listening to your podcast or my podcast, you're there for a reason. It's because you love it, you're interested in it, you like to get the scares or whatever. But yeah, and we're based out of southwestern Ontario, Canada. And like I said earlier, most of our listeners are American anyway, so.
And most of our listeners are
Canadian.
Check us out. What the heck is going on? Oh yeah. Well, I hope everybody does go and not only orders a book and starts putting you guys on their podcast list of stuff to listen to.
For sure.
I mean, I know I'm gonna start listening more often to the the ghost stuff, man. I think I've got a good friend of our podcast. He's a good friend of mine. We've had him on our. We have a show that's a little bit more funny in the middle of the week. He doesn't like it. This episode's going to freak him out because he doesn't like the ghost stuff.
Oh, no.
He doesn't like because he's like, that stuff can happen in my house. He goes, I know Bigfoot's not going to be in my house, but he goes, there could be a ghost in my house. And
just remember, there's spirits everywhere. Right? The post office, subway.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
The best Western.
The best Western. Yeah, exactly. Well, Dan, I'm so glad that you were able to come on and share your experiences, and
it's fun.
Yeah, I'm glad, and I encourage everybody, go get a copy of Strange Happenings and go watch the Phantom Faction, or go listen to the Phantom Faction podcast. And if you guys have any stories that, first you got to share them with us, with me. Then you can share it with Dan.
There we go. Don't forget about us poor Canadians.
Oh yeah. So, well, Dan, hey, I can't thank you enough, and I'm sure we'll stay in touch, and
absolutely.
Maybe we can, like I said, we'll get the judge make an appearance on your show and tell some of his stories. And,
I want to get the judge on the show.
I'm sure he will entertain your audiences for sure. So,
awesome.
For sure.
Thank you for having me, and hey, I'm going to have to check your podcast out too.
Yes. We're always taking new listeners. So
awesome. Good to hear.
So well, thanks a lot, Dan, and I'll make sure that we get some links up to your stuff on our social media, so it's easy for people. They don't have any excuse then.
There you
go. So, all right. Well, hey, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you later.
Awesome. Thanks.
What's the big deal?
Where can you get pizza, bread twists, specialty chicken, and more for just $5.99 each?
Is it at Domino's?
He hands off hand-tossed pizza and a marble cookie brownie. He's going!
There's a lot of variety on the radio and at Domino's too, where you can
Mix and match 2 or more. $5.99 each at Domino's.
2-item minimum. Pan pizza, bone-in wings, and bread bowls will be extra. Ask for this limited time offer. Prices, participation, delivery area, and charges may vary.